There is a speech Gianni Infantino gave not long ago that football fans around the world have heard quoted back many times since. He stood at a podium with the energy of a man who had spent a decade building toward this moment, and he said that watching the 2026 FIFA World Cup would feel like experiencing 1,000 years of World Cups at once. 1,000 years. He wasn't speaking quietly or with reservation. He was describing the greatest sporting event in the history of the planet. 104 matches, 48 nations, 3 countries, 16 cities, 39 days, and a final on the 19th of July at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey that he expected to be seen by more people than any sporting event ever broadcast. That speech was given when the hotels were confident, when the tickets were selling, when the promise of a $30 billion economic windfall felt like something the numbers would eventually confirm. That was the plan. Here is where things stand today. 80% of hotels across American host cities are reporting bookings below expectations, not slightly below a typical summer without a World Cup at all. Resale prices for more than 90% of all tournament matches are falling. The United States opener, America's first home World Cup game since 1994, still has unsold seats at over $1,000 each, 25 days from kickoff. One of America's most widely read publications, Newsweek, published a formal analysis this week using 2 words to describe the biggest sporting event in history: colossal dud. Climate scientists published findings 48 hours ago warning that roughly a quarter of all 104 matches are likely to be played in conditions that exceed safety limits recommended by the Global Players Union. 5 matches, scientists estimate, could be played in conditions where postponement would be advised. And yesterday, in a confirmation that tells its own quiet story about the gap between the tournament's ambitions and its reality, FIFA announced that Madonna, Shakira, BTS, and Coldplay's Chris Martin would headline a halftime show at the World Cup final, the first halftime show in the history of the World Cup, at the biggest football match on Earth, because the football, apparently, needs help filling the occasion. This is the story of how FIFA's dream for 2026, the grandest, most ambitious, most commercially driven World Cup ever conceived, arrived 25 days from opening night carrying more unresolved problems than any tournament in the modern era. Not one problem, not 2, 7 distinct simultaneous crises, each one serious on its own, each one connected to the others in ways that make the combined picture genuinely alarming for anyone who cares about what this tournament was supposed to be. Let's go through every one of them, calmly and in full, because each layer of this story deserves to be understood properly, not just summarized in a headline. The first crisis is the one that began everything else and is still the most visible: the ticket market. When FIFA announced dynamic pricing for the 2026 World Cup, the first time in the tournament's history that ticket prices would fluctuate in real time based on demand, the justification was straightforward. The North American entertainment market operates differently from European football. Concerts, sporting events, Broadway shows, prices move with demand. FIFA argued this was simply the reality of the market they were entering, and they set their initial prices accordingly. The cheapest seats for the final were listed at $6,730. Premium hospitality packages came with price tags that exceeded $10,000 per person, and in September 2025, FIFA confirmed a further tier: front row seats for the final at $32,970 per ticket. Per ticket! For one person, for one match. A price increase from the Qatar 2022 equivalent of roughly 2,000% in 4 years. The backlash was immediate and organized in ways that FIFA appeared not to have fully anticipated. Football Supporters Europe, representing fan organizations across the continent, filed a formal complaint with the European Commission accusing FIFA of abusing its monopoly position to impose excessive prices. They called it a monumental betrayal. Members of the United States Congress wrote formally to FIFA documenting that prices had risen for nearly 90% of all 104 matches, an average increase of 34% in 6 months, and compared the cost of a front-row final ticket to more than a full semester of tuition at Rutgers. And then the demand that was supposed to justify those prices simply didn't materialize in the way FIFA projected. Speculators and bots bought tickets as financial instruments, listing them on resale platforms, including FIFA's own official resale marketplace, from which the organization takes 15% from both buyer and seller at prices designed to extract maximum value from fans desperate for seats. At peak listings, 4 tickets for the final appeared on FIFA's official platform at just under $2.3 million each. When the FIFA president was asked about this in Beverly Hills, he laughed and promised to personally deliver a hot dog to anyone who paid that price. The man who runs a non-profit organization serving 211 member associations laughed in a conference room of billionaires about the cost of attending football's most important match. The consequence of all this is what Ticket Data's analytics now show. Resale prices falling for more than 90% of matches, the average cheapest seat dropping 24% in a single month. Group stage matches in less prominent venues now available on the secondary market for $160, down from over $600 in December. A self-reinforcing cycle in which falling prices encourage buyers to wait for further falls, further suppressing demand, further reducing prices. The floor hasn't been found, and the United States opener, America's first home World Cup game since 1994, still has sections of unsold seating at over $1,000, 3.5 weeks from kickoff. The second crisis runs directly underneath the first, and in many ways drove it: the hotel collapse. Fortune magazine published findings this week from the American Hotel and Lodging Association. The survey covered hotels across all 11 American host cities: Kansas City, New York, Los Angeles, Boston, Seattle, San Francisco, Houston, Dallas, Miami, Philadelphia, and Atlanta. The results were, by the standards of the hospitality industry, extraordinary. 80% of hotels reported bookings below expectations. Many describe booking pace as trailing a typical summer without any major event at all. In Kansas City, one of the most beloved sports cities in America, home of the Super Bowl champion Chiefs, the city that handed over its famous Arrowhead Stadium to FIFA for the tournament, between 85 and 90% of hotels reported the same thing. The report used a phrase that has since been widely quoted. Many respondents described the tournament as a non-event in these cities. Non-event, a phrase used by hotel operators to describe the World Cup, the biggest sporting event on the planet. The AHLA survey found that 70% of hotel owners and operators cited visa barriers alongside broader travel concerns as the primary reasons international demand had not arrived. Not ticket prices alone, the specific, concrete reality that tens of millions of potential visitors either cannot obtain the documentation they need to enter the United States or have decided, rationally, based on publicly available information, that the risk of traveling is too high. And then, FIFA made the hotel problem significantly worse. In March 2026, FIFA exercised opt-out clauses in its accommodation contracts and canceled thousands of hotel room blocks across all 16 host cities. These were rooms that hotels had been holding for 2 years, set aside for FIFA officials, media delegations, sponsor groups, and tournament staff. Hotels had built their entire summer revenue projections around the assumption that those blocks would be filled. When FIFA released them back to the general market at short notice, it flooded an already undersupplied demand with a sudden surge of inventory. Prices in some cities dropped by as much as 40% almost overnight. The AHLA's formal report described this as FIFA creating an artificial early demand signal with an overcommitment to hotel blocks that has since recalibrated sharply downward. The Hotel Association of New York City told Newsweek directly that they had anticipated an additional 1.2 million international visitors during the competition. What they're actually seeing is bookings up by a maximum of 10% year-on-year, with nearly half of New York hotels reporting no World Cup-related bookings at all. The city's hotel industry now expects to miss more than $100 million in anticipated tournament revenue. The third crisis landed 48 hours ago, and it's the one that, in combination with everything else, should concern football fans most on a human level: the heat. The World Weather Attribution Network, a coalition of climate scientists including a professor at Imperial College in London, published its analysis on the 14th of May. Their findings are specific and alarming. 26 of the 104 matches at the 2026 World Cup are likely to be played in conditions where temperatures reach at least 26 degrees in the Wet Bulb Globe Temperature Index. The WBGT measurement accounts not just for air temperature, but for humidity, sun exposure, and wind. It measures how effectively the human body can cool itself. At 26 degrees WBGT, the Global Players Union, FIFA Pro, recommends mandatory cooling breaks. Heat strain becomes a real and documented risk for players. 5 matches are expected to be played in conditions exceeding 28 degrees WBGT. At that level, FIFA Pro says postponement should be advised. The risk of serious heat illness, including heat stroke, which is life-threatening, becomes more than a precautionary concern. It becomes an operational reality that tournament management has to address before the match begins, not during it. The final, on the 19th of July at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, has a 1 in 8 chance of reaching 26 degrees conditions and a 2.7% probability of hitting the postponement advice threshold of 28 degrees. MetLife has no roof. It has no air conditioning. 80,000 people in that stadium in late July in New Jersey on a day when the probability of dangerous heat conditions is real and documented. That is a scenario the tournament organizers need to have a response to that goes beyond the 3-minute hydration breaks FIFA has mandated for each half. The climate scientists were direct about something that FIFA hasn't fully addressed. It's not only the players whose safety is at risk. Fans in those stadiums, particularly older fans, fans with pre-existing medical conditions, fans who have paid thousands of dollars for the right to sit in an unshaded seat in the July heat, face risks that professional footballers don't. The players have team doctors, physiotherapists, real-time medical monitoring. They have cooling vests, cold water at their feet, controlled recovery environments. The fan who paid $1,500 for a ticket to the final and is sitting in row 47 on the south side of MetLife has none of that infrastructure. Dr. Friederike Otto, one of the lead scientists on the WWA analysis, put it plainly. It's dangerous for players, but of course there are also the fans who might gather outdoors, and they are at even more risk because they will not be taken care of by a lot of medical doctors. 3 of the 16 stadiums in Dallas, Houston, and Atlanta have climate control and air conditioning. 13 do not. Of the matches most likely to exceed safety thresholds, a significant proportion will take place in venues without any temperature management capacity at all. Kansas City, Miami, and Monterey are highlighted as the most extreme examples. Foxborough in Massachusetts, Philadelphia, and Guadalajara are described as very high-risk venues, also without roof cover or climate control. The University of Toronto published a scientific study last year in the International Journal of Biometeorology, which analyzed 2 decades of meteorological data from the host cities. Its conclusion was that 14 of the 16 host cities will experience temperatures exceeding safe playing conditions at least some of the time in June and July. 14 of 16. FIFA Pro's formal position on this is that current protocols and laws of the game require urgent revision. FIFA has not publicly responded to requests about whether fixtures could be reallocated to ensure more matches with roof or climate control are given to high-risk time slots. Asked directly by ESPN whether such reallocations were being considered, FIFA did not respond. The fourth crisis is one that has been building since January, but that most coverage treats as a political story rather than a football one. It is fundamentally a football story. The question of who can attend. Travel restrictions currently affect nationals of 39 countries. A visa bond program that requires financial guarantees of up to $15,000 partially waived this week for ticketed fans from 5 qualifying nations, and a concession that arrived 16 days before kickoff has significantly complicated the travel landscape for nationals of 50 countries. The ACLU, Amnesty International, and more than 120 organizations issued a formal travel advisory last month for international visitors, citing increased enforcement operations, surveillance concerns, and safety risks. 4 qualified nations have fans directly affected by full or partial travel bans: Côte d'Ivoire, Haiti, Senegal, and Iran. Iran's situation deserves particular mention. Following military events earlier this year, the Iranian Football Federation issued a 10-point ultimatum to FIFA, demanding guarantees on visas, security, and dignified treatment of their flag and anthem. FIFA's Secretary General flew to Istanbul on the 16th of May, yesterday, to meet with Iranian officials and offer reassurance. Iran confirmed participation last night, with the federation president saying FIFA offered solutions for each of their 10 points. That is welcome news, but the fact that a crisis meeting in Istanbul was required 16 days before the opening match for a team that qualified legitimately and simply needed confirmation that their players would be allowed to enter the host country tells you something fundamental about how this tournament has been managed in the months leading up to it. The 5th crisis is the one football historians will write about longest: the format. FIFA's decision to expand the World Cup from 32 teams to 48 was presented as a gift to global football. More nations participating, more representation from Africa, Asia, and CONCACAF, more chances for smaller footballing cultures to experience the tournament. All of that is genuine, and the argument has merit. Curacao, a Caribbean island with a population of barely 160,000 people, has qualified for the World Cup for the first time. Cape Verde, Jordan, and Uzbekistan are first-time qualifiers. For those nations and their supporters, this tournament represents something genuinely historic. But the consequences for the tournament's competitive structure are significant and have been documented carefully by people who know the sport deeply. Jonathan Wilson, the author of The Power and the Glory, A New History of the World Cup, one of the most respected football historians in the English language, said this: "I believe that 32 teams was the right number. The biggest problem with 48 isn't really the quality. It's the dilution of spectacle in the first round, with 8 third-place teams going through, which suggests the group stage may end up trying people's patience." Think about what that means in practice. In the 32-team format, 2 teams advanced from each group of 4. Every point was precious, every goal difference potentially decisive. The jeopardy was constant. Germany went out in the group stage in 2018 and again in 2022 precisely because the format punished failure with immediate, brutal consequences. In 2026, 32 of the 48 teams will advance past the group stage, 2/3 of the field. A team can draw all 3 group games and still advance as one of the 8 best third-place finishers. Germany's consecutive humiliations in Russia and Qatar, the kind of result that forces a nation to reckon honestly with its own football, would almost certainly not have happened under the new format. With 2/3 of the field advancing, the consequences of early failure are softened in ways that reduce the pressure that makes group stage football genuinely dramatic. There will be 72 group stage matches to eliminate the same 16 teams that 48 matches removed in 2022. 72 across 16 venues in 3 countries spread across the opening weeks of a 39-day tournament. Some of those matches will be extraordinary, but some will be between a top 10 ranked European power and the first-time qualifier from a smaller confederation, played in an undersold American stadium in afternoon heat that the Players' Union has formally flagged as dangerous. The word that keeps appearing in serious football analysis of the format is the same one Jonathan Wilson used: patience. The 5th crisis arrived on Thursday and has barely been reported in the context of everything else happening around this tournament: the players' welfare question. FIFPro renewed its formal concerns about heat at the World Cup just this week. The Players' Union statement was unambiguous. Current protocols and laws of the game require urgent revision. This is a challenge the entire football industry must take on together. The union has been raising this concern since the Club World Cup last summer, when temperatures in cities like Cincinnati and Philadelphia exceeded 30 degrees Celsius during afternoon matches, and coaches described training conditions as unworkable. Those were the preview conditions. The players who come back to American cities in June and July will face conditions that climate science now confirms are worse than 1994 by a significant and documented margin.
The specific risk at the player level goes beyond discomfort. FIPRO's own medical director has stated that above 28 degrees WBGT, the risk of serious heat illness becomes more concerning not only for players but also for fans. Core temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, represent a threshold where the body's cooling system begins to fail. Cognitive function is impaired, muscle control deteriorates. In the worst cases, consciousness is lost. These are not remote possibilities. These are documented physiological realities occurring in conditions that 5 matches at the 2026 World Cup are statistically likely to encounter. FIFA's response to the heat concerns has been to mandate 3-minute hydration breaks midway through each half. Tournament regulations only require consideration of postponement above 32 degrees WBGT, a threshold 4 degrees above where FIPRO says postponement should be advised. Asked whether match allocations could be shifted to reduce risk, putting the most heat-vulnerable fixtures in the air-conditioned venues rather than the open-air ones, FIFA did not respond. The 7th crisis is the quietest, and it may be the one with the longest consequences for the tournament's legacy: the atmosphere. Everything described above, the ticket prices, the visa barriers, the hotel collapse, the fan cancellations, converges on a single question that only June and July will fully answer. Will the stadiums produce the atmosphere that makes a World Cup genuinely the World Cup? Think about what you remember from the World Cups that shaped your understanding of this sport. Not just the goals, the sound. The Brazilian section in France '98, the noise building with every pass, the wall of orange Dutch supporters in 2010, the English fans in Germany in 2006 who seemed to arrive in every city and make each venue briefly feel like Wembley. The African sections at South Africa 2010, the vuvuzelas you could hear through the television screen. The Argentinian fans in Qatar 2022 who seemed to outnumber every other nation regardless of which city they were playing in. That atmosphere is not created by corporate hospitality guests sitting in premium seats with catered food. It's not created by domestic fans who are enthusiastic but unfamiliar with the songs. It's created by supporters who have saved for years, who know every word of every chant, who feel every moment of every match with the specific intensity of someone who has been following this national team for decades and has waited their whole adult life to do it from inside a stadium. Those people, in significant documented numbers, are not coming to the 2026 World Cup, not in the proportions planned for, not in the proportions the hotel industry built its summer forecast around, not in the proportions that would have filled the mid-tier sections of the American venues with the people who generate what a World Cup is supposed to sound like. More than 16,800 international fans have canceled tickets since earlier this year. European airline reservations to the United States for July are down 14% year-on-year. Bookings from Europe and Asia for the tournament period are tracking below the same period last year. Three Lions Pride, the official LGBTQ supporter group for the England national team, announced a formal boycott. A Dutch petition requesting their national team not participate gathered over 120,000 signatures. The Facebook boycott group has over 28,500 members. Former FIFA president Sepp Blatter endorsed a fan boycott. The Queer Football Fan Clubs network across Europe issued formal advisories against travel. The U.S. opener against Paraguay at SoFi Stadium has unsold mid-tier inventory 3 weeks out. The U.S. president, reportedly a supporter of this tournament since 2018, told the newspaper he wouldn't pay the asking price to attend. Mexico's Azteca opener is sold out. Canada's venues are booking steadily. The three-nation tournament, in terms of international fan attendance, is separating visibly into a 2 and 1.
Now, and this matters for honesty, let's ask the question that cuts against the narrative of collapse. Is this actually going to be as bad as all of this suggests? No, not entirely. And history provides the basis for that assessment. Qatar 2022 was the most controversial World Cup in the modern era of the sport. 12 years of criticism, documented human rights concerns, LGBTQI+ restrictions, journalists detained, flags confiscated, the armband controversy, the late schedule change to November and December. And when the football began, it was extraordinary. Morocco's run to the semifinal, Messi's defining tournament, Japan beating Germany and Spain, Croatia eliminating Brazil on penalties, a final that went to extra time and was decided in the 116th minute. The football asserted itself. It always does. The same will happen in 2026. When Messi takes to field, potentially his sixth and final World Cup, the cameras will find him and the world will watch. When Ronaldo lines up for Portugal at 41 years old, the sheer weight of his presence will carry its own gravity. Kylian Mbappe, Erling Haaland, Florian Wirtz, Cody Gakpo, Vinicius Jr. The talent across these 48 nations is extraordinary. The knockout rounds will be brutal and beautiful in the way that knockout football at the World Cup always is. The group stage will produce upsets. The format, for all its criticisms, will give Curaçao and Cape Verde and Jordan and Uzbekistan their moment on the biggest stage in sport. Some of those matches will be genuinely moving. The experience of a football nation qualifying for the first time, playing in a World Cup for the first time, regardless of the result. That matters too. And the Mexican venues will be magnificent. The Azteca on the 11th of June, when the tournament opens for the third time in World Cup history in that building, will produce a noise that reminds everyone watching why they fell in love with this tournament in the first place. Canada's cities will welcome the world with a genuine warmth that has been building for 8 years since the bid was won. Toronto's cultural diversity will produce a tournament atmosphere unlike any other venue. A city that already contains the world in its streets will spend July proving it. The final will be watched by 1 billion people. Whatever surrounds it, whatever the hotels in New York lost in revenue, whatever the resale prices did in May, the moment when someone lifts that trophy at MetLife on the 19th of July will be one of the most watched moments in the history of human entertainment. But here is the honest summary. The 2026 FIFA World Cup was promised as one thing and has arrived as something different. The promise was of a tournament that belonged to the world, accessible, joyful, a celebration of football's universal reach, staging itself in a continent ready to welcome everyone. The reality is a tournament with hotels describing it as a non-event, tickets falling in price because demand didn't materialize, climate scientists warning about heat conditions that could require match postponements, a players' union calling for urgent revision of safety protocols, a qualified nation confirming participation only after an emergency meeting in Istanbul the day before yesterday. Fans canceled over 16,000 tickets, and the first halftime show in World Cup history added to the final because the football apparently needed reinforcement from Madonna and Shakira. That is not the tournament Gianni Infantino described when he talked about 1,000 years of World Cups. It is a tournament that overestimated demand, misread the market, misjudged what international fans would accept, and is now discovering in real time, 25 days from kickoff, the distance between its ambitions and its reality. What happens next, the football itself will decide. The sport has a way of asserting its own truth once the ball is actually rolling. It has rescued tournaments from controversy before. It will do so again. But for FIFA, for the organization that made these decisions, that chose dynamic pricing and canceled hotel blocks and awarded a peace prize at the draw and laughed about a $2 million ticket, the 2026 FIFA World Cup will be a case study in what happens when you treat the world's most beloved sporting event primarily as a commercial opportunity, in what happens when the tournament stops being about the fans and starts being about the revenue. The dream of 2026 hasn't entirely collapsed. Football is too powerful for that. But the dream that was promised, all of it, intact as described, that version is already gone.
What arrives on the 11th of June at the Azteca will be something. Whether it's what was promised is a question the next 39 days will have to answer. What do you think? Can the football itself save this tournament from everything that surrounds it? Or has too much already been lost before a single ball has been kicked? Leave it in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And if this kind of honest football journalism is worth your time, no noise, no invention, just the real story told with the depth it deserves, a like and a subscribe means everything. I'll see you in the next one. 25 days. The football is coming. Whatever else has gone wrong around it, that part is certain. And football, in the end, always has the last word.